Hello. On today's video, I will show you a review of the RondoStat Energy HR25BG thermostatic head for standard water radiators, for home space radiators or for commercial ones, because they can be used in many other circumstances, and they can be mounted instead of a standard thermostatic head. For comparison, I will also show you a typical thermostatic head you may find. Although this particular model may not be easy to purchase, I will show to you and make a short comparison regarding features. The most important aspect I will be covering is, first of all, why you need such devices. In general, in Europe, you know all too well that there is a strong push for better energy efficiency, and this also covers heating, since space heating is the most important expense you may have in your home, your office, or any other place where you need to have cooling and heating, because obviously energy use is also important for cooling, but we are not covering that over here. In terms of heating, however, it's very important to control well the temperature you have in a specific area. Although I have to say that thermostatic heads may not be the most accurate way of controlling temperature, basically because you're just having a single measure that may not be precisely where it should be the best, I think that they are important, and they are quite an easy measure that could be taken in order to keep track of your costs and make much better assessments of energy use. And of course, in Europe, we have this tendency that I think have been started by the Germans of measuring specifically the consumption at each and every heating device, in the case of district heating, as a way to show customers the cost better, and in order for them to make reductions in energy use. Of course, even considering the general trend we had in terms of energy costs, the situation was quite slowly but certainly evolving towards the requirement to mitigate part of that cost, to offset it by using more energy efficient measures. And this is one of the ways in which it could be achieved. Of course, you need a valve that is already placed on a radiator. If you don't have that, it could be purchased separately. I don't think it's a very high expense, all things considered. I think that with something around, at most, $15 or around 10 euros, you can have a complete system installed in your on your water heater, your typical indoor radiator. And of course, it can be used with both smaller and larger ones, so this is not quite a problem in the list. In general, we have been using these models, and I will be showing to you precisely how they look. There is nothing particularly fancy about them. This is the standard screw mounting, which I think, and I have tested for many years, as being the most reliable one, precise, durable, and ultimately very easy for consumers to work with. And since you can replace so easily thermostatic head, and there is no doubt about the way in which it's mounted, I think it has the greatest advantage. Another important advantage is that if needed, you can take out the head and clean or test the valve mounted on the radiator, so you can have a better assessment if your system is operating. Of course, if you are technically inclined. If not, a technician can really show you all the details or do the task for you. So this is your typical device. In general, if I remember correctly, I think that the each and every value points to a certain temperature, 5 being the highest temperature that can be achieved, I don't know, 29 degrees or something like that. And the mid position at 3 is around 22 degrees. I may be wrong, 21 or 22 degrees. We will be looking also on the specification sheet, which I have nearby, and I hope that it covers pretty well. And on the other side, you have the position that is against freezing. So probably when you're getting near 5 degrees Celsius, this might be turning the heater on. And two other positions that I assume are for turning off the device. As you can see quite clearly, there are also some ways of limiting the amount of possibilities you have in choosing your temperature. And of course, as far as I can tell, these limiters could be changed for some of these devices. I don't know if that's the case over here. It may not be readily obvious, but I guess it could be. And the moment you're going to start and rotate the head, you will notice that it also changes the position of the head relative to the mounting. And this is important because ultimately it's an analogical device. It has, if I remember correctly, a very basic principle that means inside there is a container that has a chemical compound that increases and decreases in volume as the temperature changes, and this moves back and forth the tip of the valve that is over here. I don't know if you can readily see it. If not, I will make a small adjustment. Let me see. Okay, right now it's quite obvious. There is a head that screws with this washer, with this crown. I don't remember exactly the term right now. And you have this part that actually moves the pin on the valve. All right, let's get back to where we were before. Just a moment. Sorry. Okay. And let me start by saying what was my experience with these devices for a long time. I think for more than 10 years I have been using thermostatic heads. There are many users that don't know the fact that these heads do get damaged. They do not work from a certain time. That probably takes around, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, I think. It may depend on usage, it may depend on various other factors. Build quality, I think, is the most obvious one. But what matters is that these heads do get worn off, and when they are worn off, you have no way of easily assessing if they work or not. Because the differences in temperature between the off and on position, and especially the temperature, is not quite easy to test. You will need to listen to your heater and know when it turns on or off based on some temperature difference, and even then it's quite less obvious if it's working entirely correct or if it's just starting to wear. But ultimately, of course, if the heater is on an intermediate position and you're going to blow cool air through these parts or nearby the head, probably the heater should be turned on when some time passes, I don't know, around 5 minutes or something like that, so that the compound inside changes its volume and acts on the tip of the valve. However, if the device does not work, the moment you're going to set a temperature is not going to keep it when it gets much warmer, because it's not going to stop the flow of water through the radiator. And I think this is one of the most important concerns, because many persons do not have any sort of obvious hint that the device is not working. You may have it near the end of the heating season when it might get too warm, even if you in that room, even if you set the temperature to a much lower value, and then it will be obvious. But other than that, it's quite difficult to know if it's working correct or not. They are disposable items. They have, however, a major advantage, the fact that they are very cheap. And for something that costs around €9 or $10, I don't think you can go wrong. However, as I said, this is not the focus of today's video. I will be showing more about why you might be interested in having an electronic device. However, I wanted to point this particular analogical one, because this is what most people have if they do have such devices on their heaters. And right now, let me cover what this digital or smart thermostatic head can do. First of all, thermostatic heads with digital capabilities have been on the market for quite some years. I don't know exactly when such a device was being marketed, but probably near 2010. It's not a new model, and sometimes you may not even find it in stock or purchasable anywhere. So it might be a bit old. However, it's quite good, because even newer models, or at least slightly newer models, do not have that much improved capabilities. For instance, this is the HR25BG. Honeywell also has released an HR90 thermostatic head. This one costs 32 euros. The newer one costs 40 euros. The difference may not seem much, but also I don't see a lot of changes in terms of specifications. I think it still has the basic functionality of this device, so ultimately you can have quite a good expectation regarding this. The only major change I can see is that the display can be put at a certain angle, which means that it's much more obvious to see from the front of the heater, and this might be helpful in certain circumstances. However, if you have the head mounted sideways, as is in this case, I don't think it matters too much, only if it's perpendicular to the heater. All right, what this device can do? Well, the most important thing it can do is keep tightly a set temperature. And this, I think, is the most important capability you're going to see on such a device, and one of the more important reasons for purchasing it. Also, it has the advantage of being readily obvious if it's working or not, because the moment you're going to hear it operating, it's unmistakable that it does what it has to do. On the other side, you have to keep in mind that since it's a device that operates without any external power source, you need to supply batteries, and there is a way to supply those batteries. And if I remember right, you can take out this part of the device and notice that it has place for two AA batteries, two standard AA batteries. In general, I think that you should be striving for having good batteries, because otherwise you would have to mount and dismount this device, and I don't think it's very good. And you have to be particularly careful about not damaging these mechanical parts, because if you do, then I don't think you can have spare parts. The construction is quite simple. Inside you have an electrical motor that drives this crown, which moves the pin back and forth so that the valve on your heater is turned on or off. It's not overly complex up to this point. However, the complexity is quite large when you have to think about what the device can clearly do. As you have noticed, as soon as I put on and off the heads, sorry, just a moment, if I'm going to take off the head, you notice that the display automatically resets. So you need to keep in mind this typical behavior, because if you have programmed the device, you will need to program it again. As you can see right now, it entered into the phase of setup. You may also listen to the internal motor that drives the head on and off. I think that right now, yes, it's secured. If you look closely, I don't know if right now it's... I think that the device tries to find the position at which it reaches the valve stop. I don't think it can, because right now, not being attached to a heater, you're going to see this behavior. Anyway, the setting procedure is quite simple if you think a bit. Yes, it stopped the test phase. Alright, so you have to press, I don't know, one of these buttons in order to move further. Okay. I have not put entirely the right date. You can see right now that it is in the typical mode. It has a lower temperature limit of 5 degrees. It has the off position, and you can increase in integer and also in decimal the value. I think this offers a very precise control, and I have to say that the internal electronics that are controlling the device, as you notice, again, you can hear the electrical motor. It tries to move the valve to the highest position, but unfortunately it cannot do now because there is nothing to stop against. If there was, of course, it would have stopped the water flow. But anyway, what matters much more is the fact that you can set this temperature. You can also block the temperature. I think if you're going to press these two buttons for a while, yes, unfortunately. Okay, I don't want to set the time, but right now, as you can see, no, it didn't. I think I know what I did. Just a moment. Right now it's in the lock position. As you can see, there is an indication right here of a lock that shows that it's in the lock position, and this means that a child tampering with the control would not have any success in changing it, and you need to press again these two keys in order to unlock it. And as you see, the lock icon has disappeared, and the maximum temperature you can set probably is again close to 30 degrees. So it has quite a large array of values that could be set in order to follow a specific temperature in an area. And I think this is the most important advantage you have with these devices. You can also see, as noticed over here, The fact that you can set a different temperature for the day and night. Also, there is another important part that you can set the temperature based on the entire schedule of a day. So you can set the temperature at various values for different periods of time. This means that you can turn the heat off or at a lower value when you will probably be sleeping. I'm not very keen on using such settings because I have noticed that maintaining a constant temperature offers much higher benefits in terms of operation, and not only operation but also estimation regarding consumption. And I think this matters much more because you have a clear assessment of your costs, and if you're going to use just a set temperature that is constantly followed for a room, then you will have a much better understanding of what happens. With this way of setting temperature based on a specific hour of the day, I think you will be having slight unpleasant situation if you don't have quite a predictable schedule. And I think this is one of the reasons for which I think you are much better off just sticking to a temperature and seeing if that one offers you enough comfort. And of course, going as low as possible without having any sort of discomfort. So I think that in this case, it's much better to use it as basically just about any device you had prior, the analogical one I showed to you previously. All right, regarding how well it operates, I think it operates very well. My only slight disappointment is the fact that it's a bit noisier. And if you have a very quiet home, you may notice it from time to time. But ultimately, what matters much more is if it's effective or not. And if you will watch closely, you may notice the device operating in a time span of less than 15 minutes. So if the temperature fluctuates a bit, goes a bit higher or lower, this device will take it very well into account. Another feature that is very important on such smart devices is the fact that the heater could be turned off if a strong current of air is being sensed. The temperature drops a lot. And in that case, the device goes into the open window mode, which is signaled on the display, and for around 30 minutes is not going to, or 30 minutes at most, I think, it's not going to turn the heater on, so that losses in case of airing your room are going to be much lower than in the case of a typical thermostatic head. So I think this brings a lot of benefit. As you have noticed over here, there is a number, because you can also change the program to fit on a specific routine, not only in terms of hours but also in terms of weekdays. So you can place something different on weekdays. Sorry if I got back there. You will also notice that you have a way to know if your battery is still having a right level, if it's the mode, if it's automatic, if it's manual, if it's eco. I'm not really a fan of eco mode because it's not quite obvious how those temperatures are being set, and I think this is the most important disappointment I have. Probably for some situations where you don't get too much in a specific area on eco mode, which probably means a very low temperature, because most of the time this is what happens with the eco mode, will be better. Unfortunately, as I said, I'm not a fan of these modes. I think that the most important setting is either to have that schedule, if you prefer it, and set it tightly to a specific behavior you have noticed, or a specific schedule you have around the week, or use just a standard manual setting and of course lock it to avoid mistakes of accidentally changing the temperature when you get closer to the device, or you have someone else that also may fiddle with it. So I think these are the most important issues. On the other side, it's typically heavier than your standard thermostatic head, so you have to think about that. It may also be slightly longer, which means that sometimes it may not be such a pleasant visual presence, but I don't think that this matters that much. Aesthetically, I think it's quite pleasing. I don't have many complaints about it. And the battery holds quite well. I have placed good batteries. I think that they are one of the best alkaline batteries I could find, and they are still having a lot of power even after 1 year of operation. So I think this is not going to be an issue. All right, if we are looking at the packaging, of course there was a plastic housing that we don't see over here. You notice that they mention an almost 30% reduction in energy consumption. Strangely, they have not presented this text in English. I assume that is due to the market it's being addressed, and this means that probably devices sold in other parts of Europe will have an English manual, but I don't mind that much. And they mentioned the fact that of course you have a 2-year warranty. Let's think a bit about this 30% reduction in consumption. You will not notice anywhere on the packaging, even if you will make a very good attempt at doing so, what kind of consumption reduction you're going to get. Ultimately, it depends on habits, and this is why such devices are very difficult to ascertain. On the other side, if you have a temperature and you stick to it very well, and you notice that you can live with an even different setting just because your heater reacts much quickly, and I think this is the most important advantage. Old classical thermostatic heads react quite slow. Such a device reacts much faster, and this means that your set temperature is going to be followed much tighter. And this means that comfort will increase because you have tight control of the consumption, ultimately, of the water that enters and exits the heater. So this means that I'm not expecting a 30% reduction, or at least not right away, but due to a change in behavior you may have, I think this is entirely plausible. Probably around 10% efficiency improvement is quite obviously attainable with such a device right away, and more if you're going to have the necessary amount of time to track the temperature, to see how well you are feeling in a certain environment, and then adjust probably the temperature slightly lower or higher as you see fit. All right. The device itself doesn't have only this mounting, and I wanted to show to you this package that comes with it. You can place it on a couple of radiator valves on top of them, and there are different mounting systems. However, in my experience, none of these, and especially not the plastic ones, are very reliable. The device can be quite wobbly, and such an imprecise way of keeping it tightly in a position is going to affect the precision at which the device operates. So I'm expecting it to have slight trouble on precisely adjusting for a different temperature and exerting more energy if the mounting is not as secure as it could be with this type of system. So ultimately I am against using all sorts of adapters, and I think that if you can just have or buy a valve that has this type of mounting and then use it, whether you are going to follow through with purchasing such a smart digital thermostat, or you are going to use the classical analogical one. All right. Regarding the manual is quite clear in what type of adapter you may have to use and what are the circumstances when such a device could be used. On the other side, I still think that you need to be quite confident in your mounting skills so that you're not going to over tighten or damage the device as you're going to place it. The way of initially placing this head on the valve and then mounting the two separate parts together on the thermostat head seem quite logical. However, when you're going to get accustomed to the way in which it's put on and off, I think you can also place the device like that with a bit of care, as it is in the mounted state. In the manual, you're going to see explanations for the screen. In general, it's what I have mentioned. You can notice over here how you can move the special securing metal parts that also connects the two batteries together. So you can insert or exchange, you can insert or change the batteries. The parts that should be together. Sorry if I'm taking it back and forth or from the back of the manual to the front one. And ultimately some other details about how you're going to do the mounting. Ultimately, it's not quite a difficult to use device, and I think this is one of the major merits it has. I'm pretty sure that in terms of capability, we are only at the beginning of major developments. I'm still thinking that thermostatic heads that could be controlled through smartphone applications are just around the corner. If they aren't already available, clearly they will be strongly available in the future. It's part of the smart home initiative, and certainly it will bring many advantages to persons that want to have a tight control of their consumption. So separate control of those thermostatic heads is clearly going to be important, especially if you need to have a way to balance the load. And I think this matters quite a lot for a couple of reasons. You may think, okay, I have a district heating system. Then my only way of choosing the desired temperature is using thermostatic heads. However, even if you have your own thermal plant, of course, if you are talking about gas heater, then you still may need to adjust the temperature on each and every device separately, because ultimately you may have a general flow that is going to be helpful in keeping a specific temperature. However, the situation in various rooms can depend from one point to another. And this means that discrete control of radiators may still point an additional advantage to just controlling on and off, turning on and off the gas heater depending on situation for the entire installation. So I think that those devices also have an advantage. Another important aspect I would be thinking about is the fact that those devices can be easily placed on just about any heater. So if at one point in time you have more advanced devices, you can clearly place these in another place, in another home, in another building that they may be helpful in. So the this capability of being easily moved to another place, I think, is another advantage compared with devices that depend on wires or having all sorts of other aspects that have to be taken into consideration to work properly, like so many sensors and so on. This one is a straightforward solution. It may not be entirely cheap, as I mentioned previously, because such a device, however, costs around 30 to 40 euros. But on the other side, it's quite flexible, and I think this is one of the most important advantages. If I were to recommend such a device, well, it depends. If you have the amount of money and the amount of curiosity and the requirement of really having a very strong control on your consumption, then I think that it's justifiable to pay 20 euros more just to have such a device. And I think it has the capability of working for at least 5 years. So it's not going to be such a bad economical choice. And especially the fact that you will get accustomed to tracking how much or how little heat you may need to have in a specific area. And if you are in a district heating system, you may also notice your consumption very easily. Then you have major advantages when you purchase and use such devices. In, let's say, small to medium homes, it may still be alright just to have your typical remote thermostat that you're going to operate as you always do. On the other side, if you have a larger home or if you have areas that are very different in terms of requirements, I think that you will have much better control with such a thermostatic head. And I think that the feature of closing the radiator when the window is going to be open nearby, I think it has another additional advantage, especially if you have steel heaters or aluminum ones which operate quite quickly. On the other side, with cast iron heaters, it's not so advantageous in terms of operation because they react slower to heating and cooling. However, even in that case, you can have advantages pertaining to their operation. Another important aspect I would like to mention is the fact that you will reduce the amount of water flowing into the radiator because it operates with much tighter control. This means that less water will pass through the radiator if it's not needed. On the other side, typical analog devices will slowly open and close the valve as needed. So this means that there may be situations when a very small amount of flow happens and some overshoot or undershoot pertaining to the temperature may occur. On the other side, with these devices, clearly it doesn't, and this means that the control is very precise. So if you have a strong requirement, I clearly consider a very good choice to buy such a device, use it and see it if it handles well your tasks, if it's really what you want to do, and of course later to commit to purchasing them for most or all of your water heaters and your radiant heaters. And I think that this is going to be very helpful. So I think I have mentioned most of my ideas and of course most of the perspective I had on using such devices. Clearly to me they were helpful. I hope they will be for you as well. I recommend to you to search such a device, but also keep in mind that probably this year and some years down the line there are going to be other devices that are going to be available with even more increased capabilities. So keep in mind that the device you may be purchasing might have to also be used in some other place. So this flexibility might be helpful, but also keep in mind that newer and more advanced technology is just around the corner, and the recent energy crisis that hasn't fully unfolded clearly will be a major impetus in offering products that are having even better performance than those ones. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching, and if you like these videos, please subscribe to the channel, and I hope you will see more of them. Thank you very much.